This is Margie Barrett of Lansdale, Pennsylvania, listening to the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM Montreal.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the International Radio Report. It is Sunday, March the 10th, 2024. You're listening to us on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon. Gilles is with me as usual. We thank you for tuning in. We are here every Sunday morning at 10:30 Eastern, now 14:30 UTC. We hope that you have remembered to adjust your time wherever you may be. If you adjust, some places don't, but many places making the change this weekend. So 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 14:30 UTC is when you find us on CKUT each week through daylight time. We are streamed and archived at the CKUT website, ckut.ca. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, we invite you to join the group. We have 957 members. And isn't that interesting? Our YouTube account with our shows stored on YouTube is almost equal with the Facebook group. We're at 959 subscribers on YouTube and 957 members in the Facebook group. So that's pretty neat. Yep. So we got to get those other two people to go over and join the Facebook group. So you'll find us on YouTube. Look for International Radio Report. We're at IRR. And we have a Twitter or former Twitter X account at IRRCKUT and just 45 followers there. You may want to go and follow us on the X account. So that is all the info on how to reach us and where to find our program. If you don't catch it on Sunday mornings, lots of options for you as well. We have a big event coming up here at CKUT. It is going to be the annual CKUT Funding Drive. It's beginning on Friday, March the 15th, and it is running through Sunday, March the 24th. The theme this year is Montreal Sounds Like CKUT, and it includes a CKUT-centric map that was designed by a local artist, Amory Sanford, and you can see that on the webpage. The goal this year is $50,000. Last year, they surpassed their $45,000 goal, reaching almost $55,000 by May. So let's hope we can get to the 50. CKUT will be taking donations on their brand new website for the funding drive, ckut.ca/donate, and you'll find all the information there about how to make a pledge. There are ways to do it by mailing in a check or by making a phone donation if you want, as well as doing it through the website. So over the phone, there is a studio number. There'll be people waiting to take your calls. The phone number in Montreal, 514-907-9424. And that will connect you with a staff member, and they'll take down all of your information. And if there is no one in the funding drive room at the time, there is voicemail, and you can leave a message, and they'll get back to you to take your info. So if you want to mail a check, it's payable to Radio CKUT, the address 3647 University, Montreal, Quebec, Hotel 3 Alpha 2 Bravo 3. And pledges can be made, as I said, by check, or you can use Visa Debit, you can use Visa Card, MasterCard, or PayPal. So all of those options are available for you. Now, really, any amount is acceptable and appreciated. It doesn't have to be a large one. You know, every dollar counts towards the total package at the end of the event. We do ask, if you're pledging and a listener to our show, you can tag your pledge for our show in support of not just the radio station, but in support of our show as well. Our listeners have always been very generous over the years at Funding Drive, so we hope we can count on you again this year. So there are some prizes and sort of little gifts in return for your pledge. A $30 donation will get you a CKUT magnet and one entry for the Tier 1 draw of prizes. A $60 donation gets you a t-shirt and or a tote bag or a poster, plus the one entry for the draw. A $90.30, which ties into the 90.3 frequency of CKUT, is a T-shirt, a tote bag, and an entry for the Tier 2 draw, which is a little bit bigger prizes. $120 donation or $10 a month or more gets a shirt, a tote bag, a limited edition a CKUT mug, and or a poster, plus 2 entries into the Tier 2 prizes. And finally, a $240 donation or a $20 a month donation, 3 entries into the grand prize draw, and 4 funding drive gifts of your choice. So those are all the little incentives for you to make a pledge, and a little thank you for making the pledge as well. So this is a really important event for CKUT every year. Without this, we probably wouldn't be here.
No, we would not. And, it's the band is full of stations. There's competition on the FM band. And often that competition kind of drives people away from community radio station. It goes into more of a, standard everyday radio station that plays the same music, the same thing, doesn't have a lot of variety. Community radio is totally different. You hear programming on this station that you will not hear anywhere else on the FM band and on the radio in general. International Radio Report, but tons of shows about issues, international issues of different communities and different styles of music that just doesn't fit in the standard radio mold. So it's important to keep these stations alive. So it's very important for you guys to help us out and keep radio alive, keep CKUT alive, and at the same time, you keep the International Radio Report alive.
Yeah, we're very fortunate enough here to have had this program on the air at CKUT since 1987. I think there's only one or two other programs that have been around as long as us. And like Gilles said, it's not the kind of program you're going to hear on conventional mainstream radio. One thing that the station really promotes is they give voices to the voiceless. Different elements of the community, different nationalities, different social interest groups. Basically, anybody can come here, put in a proposal for a radio show, and hopefully, if there's an open spot, you can get on the air and present your program. So it is really important to keep stations like this around, but they do cost money. Yeah. There are lots of expenses involved to keep the transmitter running. They have to rent space for the antenna up on Mount Royal and everything else that goes in running any other type of business. The station has, thankfully, a lot of volunteers, so there's not a huge overhead as far as staff is concerned. Just to keep the lights on and the telephones working and the computer systems up and running and a web page and all of those things do cost a lot of money. And if you saw all the equipment that we have here too, that is, to keep a radio station running requires a lot of equipment, and it breaks down, it needs repairs, it needs replacement. So all of this goes to contribute to keeping us alive. So we'll be doing 2 shows during Funding Drive the next 2 Sundays. So we do hope that you'll make a pledge. And you don't have to only make a pledge for us. You can, if you have other shows you like at CKUT, you can always split your donation up between different shows and what have you. But the main thing is to get in touch, go to the web page or call a radio station. Check the website out for all of the details. It's a part of the CKUT website, but it's a special section, ckut.ca/donate. And you can pledge basically any time you want to. You don't, frozen into doing it during the funding drive period. You can make a donation at any time during the year, but we really focus on it for the funding drive period. So we hope to hear from you, and we'll tell you more about it on our 2 funding drive shows coming up for the next 2 Sundays.
Russia bans Radio Free Europe and labels it as undesirable. This is via Radio Info Asia. The Russian Ministry of Justice has added Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, to its register of undesirable organizations, according to the Russian Ministry of Justice register, media reports, and a statement by RFE-RL. This is an escalation from its previous designation as a so-called foreign agent, and the designation bans it from operating in Russia. Anyone working for the organization now faces up to 6 years in prison and administrative fines. It also makes it a crime to distribute the outlet's content. Since 2021, Russian authorities have labeled more than a dozen media organizations undesirable. The Russian Ministry of Justice added RFERL to its register of so-called foreign agents in 2017, making it the first media organization to be labeled as such, along with Voice of America. Authorities froze the bank accounts of the Russian branch of RFERL in May 2021, and a court declared it bankrupt in March 2023, following the broadcaster's refusal to pay fines issued for non-compliance with the country's foreign agent law. RFERL President Stephen Capus said the designation is the latest example of how the Russian government views truthful reporting as an existential threat. Millions of Russians have relied on us for decades, including record-breaking audiences over the past few days since the death of Alexei Navalny, and this attempt to stifle us will only make RFERL work harder to bring free and independent journalism to the Russian people, Capus said in a statement. Russian authorities' drive to persecute Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty runs deep, but so does the outlet's commitment to delivering unbiased information to the Russian people, said Golnoza Said, CPJ's Europe and Central Asia Program Coordinator. Russian authorities should immediately repeal their legislation on undesirable organizations and stop banning any reporting that contradicts the government's narrative. So once again, when a voice is a nuisance, when it talks about things you don't want people to hear, well, what do? You do everything you can to shut it down and to even, scare people or journalists away by trying to say, well, if you, continue working for them and are on our territory, we'll arrest you and put you in jail.
Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty had a very successful campaign in the Cold War period, and many people credit RFERL's broadcast for stimulating the people and getting them to stand up to regimes in different countries. So I guess the Russian authorities are feeling the heat a little bit, maybe from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and just don't want people to hear them any longer. So these are some pretty drastic measures, but I guess given the way Russia has been acting, it's probably not all that surprising that they're doing this.
A voice that is very powerful and shows the power of radio once again. When you send out news to people that listen, things can change.
At least there are many outlets for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty throughout Europe, and they can still get that programming into Russia via the radio. So that is a good thing. There's
some shortwave and some medium wave outlets that probably make a pretty good distance within the Russian territory too.
Yep, for sure. More government influence on things going on in radio. Seems like we have a lot of stories with that theme to them of late. This one is also from Radio Info Asia, and its headline is Taliban bans women from calling up radio stations in the Khost province. The Taliban have banned girls and women from making phone calls to radio stations and television channels in the southeast Khost province. According to the AFJC, an official letter dated Saturday, February 24th, signed by Abdul Rashid Omari, the Taliban police chief in Khost province, states, some private radio stations in Khost are promoting moral corruption, such as broadcasting school lessons or social programs involving many girls. Girls are engaging in illegal phone calls with the presenters of these programs during official and unofficial hours, leading to moral corruption in society and violating Islamic values. The letter concludes with a warning to media officials that they will face summoning and prosecution if they allow girls to participate in phone calls to media outlets. Currently, there are 15 radio and 3 private TVs operating in Khost province, in addition to state radio and television stations. In another similar directive, Taliban authorities have also warned of barring female journalists and women at large from media platforms unless they comply with a dress code requiring that only their eyes be visible. AFJC said that the warning was issued by Mohammed Khaled Hanafi, head of the Taliban's Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice Ministry, in a meeting with journalists in Kabul. The AFJC said in a statement that local media professionals in the country have dealt with stringent work conditions requiring them to strictly follow a set of media guidelines the Taliban introduced after reclaiming power in 2021. The Taliban have also prohibited teenage girls from receiving an education beyond the 6th grade. Female aid workers are banned from working for non-governmental humanitarian groups, including the United Nations, except in the health sector, and females are not allowed to visit public parks, gyms, or bathhouses. Due to the ban on schools for girls above the 6th grade, educational programs through media outlets have increased across the country. AFJC has expressed serious concern over the impact of this ban on the freedom of the press and demands its immediate cancellation. Under the Afghanistan media law enacted by the previous government, which the Taliban government has recognized as still valid, individuals are guaranteed the right to freedom of expression, including the dissemination of information without government interference. However, there have been instances of Taliban officials intimidating and meddling in media operations. The Taliban have rejected criticism of their governance, saying it is aligned with the Islamic law of Sharia and Afghan culture. So this is pretty dramatic steps, really focusing on what women can and can't do in the country.
You know, we were talking last week, you had mentioned in the article we talked about the women calling in for, medical information and all sorts of other information. What happens if? Well, this is what happens if you're keeping women ignorant by not, having school. You are trying to control them in a way that you want to control them. And unfortunately, this is sad. Sad to see that not only, is the control so intense and women just can't do what they want, it's also life-threatening for some. Not having medical information or not having information pertaining to any other impact or something that's happening with their lives can have dramatic effect.
It's almost contradictory now to stories that we had just in the last few weeks about some stations being run by women.
Yep.
And now you start to wonder, how long are they going to last with the government putting in these restrictions? Chances are those stations may not continue to exist.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, the sun this week was kind of quiet. They had a little bit of flaring, but not that much. Still, in the last couple of weeks, what was interesting is that there were quite a few flares and some strong flares, but the impacts that they had were very minimal. This week, we saw the same thing. Days when we thought that maybe a coronal mass ejection would impact Earth and have a geomagnetic storm didn't happen. We did finally have a G1 class storm this week, but overall, even though propagation was not maybe as good as the previous couple of weeks, it was still not bad, and we had an interesting week with radio propagation. Now there's a sunspot AR3599, which is capable of strong flares. We'll be keeping an eye on that, but overall, things are quiet right now. Sunspot number 99, the solar flux down to 137, and there are no coronal holes to impact this week. So basically, all will depend on is that sunspot going to flare. If it does, then there will be some impacts possibly. But overall, conditions seem to be quiet right now. And to witness all of this, well, you will have to turn on a radio and listen.
Hey there, I'm Paul Kaltenbach, live in Hell's Kitchen, New York City. You're tuned to International Radio Report, 30 minutes of news about radio on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
So in our next story, we have Palestinians that send radio messages to loved ones in Israeli jails. This is via the Malay Mail. Palestinians with relatives in Israeli prisons have been deprived of visiting rights during the Israel-Hamas war, opting instead to send messages to loved ones on a radio program. Hello, this message is for my brother Islam. How are you, my brother? Said one greeting sent via Palestinian radio show called Messages for the Prisoners. Your house is ready. When you get out, you will be all set to find someone to marry. The show on popular Palestinian radio Ayal, based in the city of Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, features personal messages from families that often end with the sentences, "We hope you will hear these words." Campaigners have said the number of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails has swelled to around 9,000 from about 5,200 before Hamas' October 7 attack on Israel that triggered the war. After waves of arrests and tough restrictions on detainees followed the attack, the radio station has been inundated with messages from relatives. In response, it has extended the show by more than an hour. We get messages from everywhere, as many families no longer have any news of their loved ones in prison, said Walid Nasser, Radio Ayal's editor-in-chief. Dear Dad, I can't wait for you to come back to take me to school, said one of the messages, which are often read by children and sometimes marked by a suppressed sob. Everything is fine at home, everything is fine at university, don't worry, said another message. The show's host, Maysam Barghouti, who reads out some of the messages herself, said many families are looking for hope to hold on to. The show is really the only means to communicate with a loved one or to get information. Israeli prison authorities announced a state of emergency after October 7th to prevent potential involvement of inmates in any further unrest, cutting off visiting rights and barring phone calls. The October 7th attack resulted in the deaths of about 1,160 people in Israel, mostly civilians, according to an AFP tally of official Israeli figures. Hamas militants also took about 250 Israeli and foreign hostages, 130 of whom remain in Gaza, including 30 presumed dead, according to Israel. Israel's retaliatory campaign has killed at least 29,410 people, mostly women and children, according to the latest count by Gaza's health ministry. Amid the war, radios have also been banned in prisons, but the families, as well as Radio Ayal staff, hope that inmates are still somehow able to tune in. The Palestinian Prisoners Club advocacy group said visits by the International Committee of the Red Cross have also stopped. Both the ICRC and Israel declined to comment. While some Palestinians are detained without known charges, the most common grounds for arrest range from online calls for violence to alleged militant activity. Prison conditions have deteriorated since the start of the war, several rights groups have said based on unofficial Israeli data and accounts from former inmates. My brother has been in prison for 22 years, and the last 3 months have been the most difficult for all of us, said Ihsan Kamal, whose brother, Said, was sentenced to 38 years for attacking Israelis. My parents used to visit him once a month, Kamal said. Now we have absolutely no news, and we hear that the situation is terrible in the prisons. Rights groups say that at least 9 Palestinians have died behind Israeli bars since October 7th. The Association for Civil Rights in Israel has called on judges to visit prisons where Palestinians are held to inspect their conditions. The Supreme Court has announced that judges would go to jails, but no visits have yet been reported. Ola Zagul is used to being away from her husband Mohammed, now in his 60s, who has spent more than 2 decades in Israeli prisons. My daughters grew up without a father, she said. One of the daughters, Aksa, An 18-year-old student said, "We just need to hear his voice. Just by his tone of voice, we would know if he is okay or not." Mohammed, who was released in July and arrested again on January 10th, is ill and was due to undergo neurological examination in Germany, the family said. He was arrested again just a few days before the planned departure. "We know he's not doing well," said the Zagul's youngest daughter, Dana. Her father had been sentenced over his involvement in the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, the armed wing of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas' Fatah party. "Mohammed has a strong mind, but his health is worrying," said his brother Youssef. "I miss him," he said. "We went to school together before the war," Youssef added. "I think of him every time I head to the university." Well, sad stories, stories that radio is being used to try to at least get news and communicate with some of the prisoners that a lot of people have no news of. And with what's happening, the deterioration of the quality of life, and particularly life in prison, I think it's important for radio to maintain that link and hope for the best.
Yeah, it's got to be difficult to even try to get the messages through, though. I would think, with the damages to the infrastructure that have gone on because of the conflict, conventional systems, at least, portable radio, what have you, might be working, but, how do they get the message into the radio stations? Could be difficult as well.
Yeah.
Cell service maybe not working well. Regular phone service may be disrupted. It's got to be very difficult in the whole region right now with the way things are. So at least they're doing their best to get some things out on the radio. Whether the radios are accessible to the prisoners, that may be a problem as well. So we shall see how it goes. But at least there are attempts. And again, that good old technology of radio is coming through once again when all of the new technology seems to be failing.
And we have upcoming ham radio contests.
Yeah, we have 3 events coming up next weekend. The first is organized by the British Amateur Radio Teledata Group. It's the BARTG HF RTTY contest, and it runs from 0200 Zulu March 18th to 0159 Zulu March the 20th, 80 through 10 meters, and it is radio teletype only.
There's the Russian DX contest, 1200 Zulu March 16th to 1200 Zulu March 17th, organized by the Union of Radioamateurs of Russia. Bands are 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters. No contest QSOs on the WARC bands. And the modes, phone and CW.
And finally, the Sterling Park Amateur Radio Club is organizing the Virginia QSO party. It's spread over 2 days, 1400 Zulu March 16th to 0400 Zulu March the 17th. Then they take a break and start up again 1200 Zulu to 2400 Zulu on March the 17th. The bands are 160 through 10 meters, no WARC bands in the event, and it is an all-mode QSO party.
And we are out of time.
We thank you for tuning in. Do not forget the CKUT Funding Drive coming up later this week. We'll tell you more about it on next week's show. In the meantime, check out ckut.ca/donate to get all of the information about how to make your pledge to support the CKUT 2024 Funding Drive. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week here on CKUT with the next edition of the International Radio Report. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.